Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader,
Thank you again
Joe
for those
Kuchera.
that are watching us via the live feed on Facebook. We'd love to be able to give you all kinds of different opportunities to watch the show, listen to the show. Love the fact that people take the time to do this on Facebook, but we'd really love to have you download the podcast. That way you could access these, the past shows, any shows you want, your convenience at your time. A couple different ways you could do that. You go to iTunes, just type in Real Estate Radio Live, get the podcast. You go to our website, RE Radio Live, and get the podcast at any time and listen to it. And the series that we have been doing for, what, Jack, 3 months, maybe more now,
it's longer than that. I think
this might be
number 18.
Yeah, 18 or 19.
I think it's 4 or 5 months now.
Starting something new in Silicon Valley. Jack, I'll have him take a minute or so, just a second, to go through his background and what his law firm does. But in general, we've been spending some time in this series talking about startups, Silicon Valley startups. From start to really, we're taking us through a number of different series. We could probably take this for the next couple of years.
I don't know. I don't know if I can drive here over the next couple of years.
Well, we got to get your studio.
Every time I drive here, it's like more traffic. It was literally a parking lot on Route 17.
Well, it's because you start getting all these startups together and the traffic gets worse.
The story I tell is the one thing I learned from my previous mentorship by Bill Fenwick. He used to say, and he had a southern voice, he'd say, just take the month of August off. It's very slow in the month of August. I said, Bill, that's a great idea. I can't do that. I got to work. He said, no, just take it off. And you know what? I'm starting to believe he's right.
Wow.
Except it's so busy, and Silicon Valley is going through this new cycle, artificial intelligence, big data, all this Bitcoin stuff, all this blockchain.
That's true. Autonomous. You go on and on and on.
So you see it in the traffic patterns.
Yeah.
And you literally, if you're really smart, which I'm not, if I was really smart, I would check Google Maps before I left, and it would say it's going to take you, instead of what should be 20 minutes, it's going to take you an hour.
Yeah.
I would say, Joe, I'm going to call in. And you'd say, yeah, it makes sense. In fact, your phone would ping, as would mine. If you're even thinking about going there, forget it. It's not going to get there on time. But I'm here.
It is the world we live in for sure, and there's a lot to be grateful for that, certainly, but along with comes that high prices of housing and traffic and everything else. So today the topic is going to be when the crisis is class action litigation in terms of e-business, e-commerce. Is
right,
that right?
And the reason I think it links in well is the last one we did was on litigation funding. And what we're seeing more and more is litigation-funded cases that are brought as class action cases against Internet-based businesses. Now, the easiest version of this is, Apple's got a big business. It gets sued all the time. Facebook gets sued all the time. But what's happened is when there's a hacking event and you don't have the right security and it turns out that personally identifiable information is leaked out, there'll be some lawyer or law firm that will be looking around for some client who will be a representative plaintiff in a class action case that will be funded by litigation funders, if not the law firm itself. And so today, this week, literally, we got a client, one of our clients, I'll leave their name out, an electronic, it could be any internet-based business. It had a hack. It engaged in all the right things. In fact, the hack was a couple of years ago. And literally what surfaces this week, and I brought a copy here, the public complaint, class action case brought by an East Coast law firm. East Coast, not even in California. Lawyers on the East Coast, they affiliate with the West Coast law firm as well, typically a small law firm that's just sort of handling paperwork. East Coast law firm found a individual who can act as the class representative and then put in some time to draft a complaint saying, look, I think a whole bunch of people whose information was leaked have been injured, so I want to get a recovery. Now, think about that for a second. Let's say you've had the unfortunate experience of being hacked. It's happened to me. I've had every version of it. I've had the version where they make up credit card applications. I've had the version where they've tried to get into our email. I've had the version where I get a call from one of our banks. Are you really asking for a wire transfer of all of your monies out of your account?
So this is different than Wells Fargo open up bank accounts.
That's right. I mean, that's there too.
That's another story.
That's another story. But literally, they will assemble a team to put together a lawsuit that says everyone's, quote, similarly situated. So they assume the hack probably is not just you, because there literally are these organizations that are just hacking away, trying to get into your server or some server like a Microsoft server or a Google server, downloading sensitive information, lots of what's in your email, often there's account numbers, and then selling that on the dark web. So they are complaining that, and I'll give you the analogy of real estate. Years ago when I was in law school, the big to-do was, can a landlord be held liable if someone gets raped by a criminal in the parking lot of the apartment building? Remember this decades ago? There was a big question, like, the landlord didn't put the right lighting in, the landlord didn't have enough security. It's very analogous. And we as students would say, historically, criminal acts cut off any causation. Any other person couldn't be liable. An intentional criminal, wrongfully criminal act, that cuts off all liability. That was the ancient law. The modern court said, no, we're living in a modern world where if you can reduce the risk by doing things, then you're responsible as the landlord. So now, by analogy, this is what's happened in the hacking area. Even though the criminal act of hacking was maliciously intentional, a criminal violation, federal and state law, the fact that you didn't have enough security around your particular servers generates the argument that you're negligent.
I see.
So they present the case the same way, which is negligence for failure to provide sufficient security. Even if you've documented, I had experts come in, I buy all these products, I put up all these firewalls, I do all these things. They're like, well, maybe you could have done something more.
And there are insurance policies. Not that that's the only thing you do, right? But there are policies.
There are insurance policies, and oftentimes these class action cases in particular are covered. But in general, think about it. If you're a small startup e-business, you just got your funding, maybe you got $2 million, and you think, wow, I'm set. All of a sudden you get sued, and you're waking up and saying, I don't have sufficient insurance, I don't have sufficient wherewithal, this may cost me several $1 million to defend. What do I do? I mean, this is one of those things that's like an atomic bomb hitting you.
And isn't it going to be quite different for the e-commerce or online company that has personal private information versus someone that's just maybe generic in nature, right?
Yes, that's an important distinction.
You're securing Social Security numbers, bank account numbers.
That's right. And in fact, the more you think about it, you could argue the GDPR that we had a segment on, which is the EU's version of the way the future should handle how you handle that sensitive information, would argue the minute you get that sensitive information and you use it, you should get rid of it. Unless you really have a reason to store it. It's almost like it's scary to hang on to it because it's risky. So in that sense, the GDPR is actually helpful in reducing the risk for companies. Well, of course, companies like to hold lots of information because they think, this gives us more value. But the truth is, if you have information for closing a real estate transaction and the transaction gets done, get rid of, redact, and get black out or otherwise get rid of all of the unnecessary information, because the reality is it's only there for someone to potentially hack into. The odds that you're actually going to use it again are probably low. So this case that came in this week, we looked around and we said, well, show us what your terms and conditions are, because this goes all the way back to one of the earlier discussions we had, I think it was radio show 3 or 4, where we said, how you draft the terms and conditions will be important for defending this unknown future. And luckily, they actually had a really good set of terms and conditions, which I'd like to get into in some detail, because it will enable some solid defenses to this lawsuit that, to me, demonstrate how this whole area is like a big tapestry, a big mosaic where you call it pieces to the puzzle. It is a lot of little pieces to the puzzle on how, as you grow a business, you have to do risk analysis, risk minimization, risk identification and try to lower the risk, and to the extent you can, try to anticipate and insure for it if you can afford the insurance. Right. And that's very much what business planning is all about, really, from day one.
So they get hacked, and so what you're going to do is the first thing you're going to do, if these attorney groups think they have a case at all, they do a little investigation work and find out if they had all the right things in place to potentially prevent something like that.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know this law firm that's representing the plaintiff. I don't really know. I guess I've learned that they filed other class action cases against other e-commerce businesses. Now, let's face it, the cost of defending the case is so high that it's almost automatic that these guys are going to get some recovery.
Try to settle.
By settlement. Now, sometimes they choose the wrong party that decides to fight. Yeah. And, of course, if that party can really get some good publicity out of it, it's great. But these law firms are even more enabled by the litigation funding we've talked about. If you think about it, a small law firm with a litigation funder is like a larger law firm that can self-fund. Yeah. So it does, in some way, juice up the risk because these lawyers tend to be entrepreneurial. The litigation funders, as we know, are entrepreneurial. And the situations where there is at least a theoretical damage from something happened that shouldn't have happened. Right. Of course, every day of the week something happens that shouldn't happen. Every day of the week, because there's armies of workers in countries in Eastern Europe and other places around the world that are just targeting American computers. Yep. That's a daily event, and it goes on almost applauded by these other economies, because it's a little bit like almost class warfare. Yeah. It's, hey, you're a rich country, we're a poor country. Hey, you've got a lot of wealth in those computers. We have computers that can drill into that wealth. And, you guys have insurance, so, life goes on in the big city. It's almost like we're never going to end up in jail. I mean, look at the indictment that Mueller accused 15 Russian spies. I mean, are those people ever going to see justice? And I mean, is that really ever going to happen in our lifetime?
No, it's not. We're going to take another quick, or I shouldn't say another, we're going to take our first and only quick break. Before we do that, Jack, if you give the listeners a reminder about your law firm, what you guys practice in, and how they may want to contact you if they have the services or needs in those particular areas.
So it's Jack Russo at Computer Law Group in downtown Palo Alto. It's 650-327-9800, or Jack at Computer Law. That's one word, computer and the word law, strung together.
Well thought out years ago.
I know, years ago. We thought it was brilliant. Someone said, why don't you just go with CLG.com? That would have been more brilliant, because we're a Computer Law Group. Of course, somebody else has that now, but we're computerlaw.com. So it's Jack at computerlaw.com, and the website is www.computerlaw.com.
Great. Different practices, you guys.
So we do everything internet, everything e-commerce, everything software, hardware, for everything from the inventor to the public company. And in this case, this was actually a public company that went private, and we do even major defense as well as major plaintiffs work. So this cyber breach stuff is right in our wheelhouse. We've been doing it for decades compared to other firms, because we started with computer industry as our focus.
Very good. All right, we're going to take a quick break. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. We're going to come back. For those that are following us on Facebook, stick with us. Just quick, 1 minute, and we'll be back with you.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.
Getting ready to buy or sell a home in 30, 60, or 90 days? Check out BundleSelect.com to find out how you could save 20% or more on your entire transaction, real estate, lending, and title. With BundleSelect.com, technology and a personal concierge are at your service to save you time and money. BundleSelect's hand-picked team of experts will compete for your business, so you'll save thousands of dollars by bundling real estate, lending, and title services. BundleSelect.com gives you all the control, including using your own realtor. I'm Joe Kuchera with Real Real Estate Radio Live, and I have been on the radio educating consumers for years. I'm here to tell you BundleSelect.com is the best way to save money on real estate. By bundling services, you could save tens of thousands of dollars. This savings model could save you money on your move, lower your interest rate, or cover your closing costs. Visit BundleSelect.com. That's BundleSelect.com.
The estimated minimum savings are based on a comparison with the national average. Individual results may vary, and the estimated savings are not guaranteed. Bundle Select Inc. is a licensed real estate broker. California Bureau of Real Estate Broker license number 004666902.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's topic or guests, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Kuchera.
All right, welcome back in. Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. We're continuing our series, starting something in Silicon Valley with Jack Russo. Today's topic, when the crisis of class action litigation is involved really in e-commerce, e-business. The first part, Jack's explaining the process, what happens, again, how to best prepare yourself. I hope by the time we get done with these series, we don't scare people away from doing business or starting businesses, although it's always a risk. Super educational process, though, isn't it?
And that's probably what most people should have in mind, that as much as you may not want to dive into a cold pool, once you get in the pool, it eventually warms up.
Or you get used to it.
I mean, you can be in a lot of fear diving in, but you swim for a couple of minutes at least. I mean, the reason I was thinking about this is there's a group of people that swim Lake Tahoe. I don't know if you've ever put your foot in Lake Tahoe. Man,
even in the heat of summer, it's cold.
They apparently swam across Lake Tahoe. That's a long swim. And I said, did they survive the swim? They said, the hardest part is getting in. And apparently, once you get in, your body
adapts,
temperature eventually adapts, and so long as you don't freeze to death, you're okay. So it's a little bit like starting a business. Once you get the swimming going, everything starts to move in the right direction, and of course, you pay attention to these risks. For sure.
What are the lessons companies? Someone listening to this podcast, whether you start a company already, maybe you're even a senior veteran company.
That's right.
You could learn from this, or a startup. What are some of the things, Jack, that they should be doing?
So first of all, the world is changing. We say that often. And it's changing to enable more litigation. We've talked about that. There's more funding sources. There's more entrepreneurial lawyers. There's more ability to have access to the courts. There's more. When you add all that more together, the odds of not getting sued if you're in business are extremely small. Just the nature of the beast. It's almost, friends of mine are moving to Montana and buying, 600 acres. And I was like, why do you want to do that? Well, first of all, it's cheap compared to Silicon Valley. Secondly, I'll never get into a fight with my neighbors because I have no neighbors, And I say, okay, well, what happens if you have a fire? I said, that's a problem. You have to have a way to get out. But you have no neighbors, you have no support system. So if you want to be in this world and you want to be supported, there's odds of conflict are high, odds of litigation are high. So you have to anticipate it. So if you're doing an e-commerce business, writing terms of service, privacy policies, specific notices for your site so that you can rely on those in defense. In the case that we were talking about that came in this week, the terms were actually very good. And as I was talking to the executives on the other side, I said, man, the lawyer, because I wasn't the lawyer that did this. It was done even years and years ago. And I said, they did a pretty good job because they anticipated that there could be a class action case. And they wrote in 3 provisions that are really right on point. So provision number 1 was any dispute, controversy, claim of any type, blah, 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 must be arbitrated individually and not as a class action. Point 2 is they put in a specific all bold paragraph that said any dispute must be arbitrated and you waive your right to be in a class action. So they tried to cover if someone would potentially cover both somebody else is bringing a class action, you can't be in the class action. You have to go to arbitration. And then point 3, which I think is really interesting because it plays right into this controversy, is they said if you have a dispute, which you can't bring as a class action and which you can only bring through arbitration, you have to bring it within 1 year of when the claim arose. The hacking in this case arose 2 years ago. So they have a complete contractual statute of limitations against these very claims. So now what's the real kicker here? The kicker is there's the potential that the law firm that brought this case didn't do adequate research. They may be liable for the legal fees that are incurred in the defense of this case because it looks like they didn't read the operative contract. I mean, that's like...
It's hard to believe,
it's
but
hard
does that
to
happen?
believe. It happens. Either it happens recklessly, as in, yeah, we don't care what that says, we're going to try to get around it, or it happens like, gosh, really? Were there terms and conditions? You, client, came in and told me there was a hack. You told me that you think your data was taken. You told me that you have some illegal credit card charges you can't trace. By the way, it's not obvious that this particular person wasn't hacked in some other ways.
Could it also be that they look at this and maybe they overlooked a lot, or even saw it and they said, I don't really care because there's so much potential damage here, it won't matter? Could it be something like that?
Something along the lines of, I know what this says, but I'm going to convince the court not to allow it to apply in this case. But what's missing from this complaint, that if their thinking was along those lines, they really should have wrote part of the explanation of why they think they get around it. In other words, they shouldn't have treated it like it doesn't exist.
Okay.
It exists.
Should have addressed it.
It should have addressed it and then tried to explain why it's not operative. It looks very sloppy. It looks very much like someone just took some boilerplate complaint and said, oh, I'm going to bring another case. You know, I just got a settlement in this one and I made a bunch of money and now I can go back to the roulette wheel and file another one. But the point is, regardless of whether the law firm was or wasn't sloppy or the particular lawyers were or weren't sloppy, the fact that these cases are being filed, and if you're running a growing e-commerce-based business, you have to sort of have in your head, this is likely to happen, particularly if your business starts to get traction, because in a way you become a target. It's almost like the analogy is we've been imagining there's, effectively organized crime overseas attacking U.S.-based businesses. It's like there's a bunch of lawyers that are following what's going on in those attacks. So the minute Target says, we want to let everyone know that our credit card files have been breached, there's a bunch of lawyers already researching, let's figure out whether we're going to bring a class action case depending on what happens to remedy the breach or whether it's remedied or not. We're going to say that shouldn't have happened, like the landlord who, everyone knows that unfortunately rapes happen, assaults happen, that you got assaulted in a bank. There was a holdup going on in the bank that you were visiting as a patron, and you're a big guy.
That's right.
And you had to give your shirt up for the DNA evidence. I mean, it's a good story.
And walk out in a hospital gown. It was a great story.
And so you've been damaged. I don't think you're the same person you used to be. You don't go into banks anymore. But the point is, at the end of the day, you have to be thinking to yourself, there are risks that are inevitable.
Right.
And it's just knock on wood that you say, gosh, every day you wake up in the morning, you say, gosh, it's so good not to be sued, not to have some class action case pending against you. And these businesses like Facebook, I mean, they've got 2.2 billion people on Facebook now. That's like a quarter of the planet. That's a third of the planet. That's more than half of the planet that has computers.
So
think about that.
No, it's amazing. So litigation, or the idea of all this new technology that's coming in, and in some cases there's so much excitement around it, money around it, investments around it, big stuff, you can go down the list. Boy, that'll play just as big as a part as all this, right? Litigation or potential with all these new technologies.
And we have judges, as I said in the previous show, pulling their hair out because they see more and more cases. It used to be I clerked for a judge, so I know it used to be if a judge had 100 cases, that was a lot of cases. Then it got to 200, 300, and we thought, man, it's hitting a breaking point. Most federal judges have about 500 to 600 cases at any open cases at any given time, and they're rated by how quickly they get to a disposition.
They are, huh?
So they're not robots. Obviously, they've got to do justice to a case.
We can't get that information on Yelp, though, can we?
Well, there is. There actually is
like a rating
website.
Review.
There's a rating review site. Really? I'm trying to remember the name. It's something like Robes Review, or it has the name Robes in it. And it tries to be a Glassdoor or Yelp to how quickly judges get to cases. Of course, it has sporadic data.
Right.
Probably more people complaining about judges than people saying they're doing a great job. But the Federal Accounting Office tries to see what districts, because we have lots of states that each have either 1, 2, 3, some even have 4 or 5 districts. So there's more than 100 different district courts throughout the nation among the 50 states. And different judges take different time frames for similar cases. So they're trying to figure out, why does that happen? Why are some judges able to take a patent case and get it from the filing to the verdict within a year, and others take 3 or 4 years? Why is that? Well, obviously some of it is, what's the other workload that's on those judges? How many clerks do they have? How do the lawyers act? You know, lots of different variables. So they're trying to make the system more efficient. But when you've got the inbound filing happening with sort of a waterfall of filings, it gets really hard, even with all the automation they've put. So every case now is online. You can get immediate access to the entire docket. That was historically unavailable until relatively recently. We've got this nationwide system that can ping you. If there's someone you want to know, are they getting sued, like Facebook, you can run a robot that says, tell me about the latest number of cases filed against Facebook. And let me tell you, if you run that robot, almost every day there's a new case filed against Facebook, new case against Google, new case against Apple. All the big guys that are doing big things, they're getting sued every day of the week. And they're managing with inside and outside counsel that are growing over time.
How do these things, or maybe it's not so simple of a question, but this is probably someone that I wonder about. I'm sure the basic consumer does too. With all these lawsuits and litigation that takes place, how are they prioritized when they go in? I mean, how does that work?
So criminal cases get first priorities because there actually is a statute that places a duty to get a case through the process. It's called the Speedy Trial Act. So it's a federal, if we're talking federal, but there's a comparable state act. So criminal cases go first. Then if you have a case that involves a person, it used to be anyone over 65. Now I think you got to be over 70 or 75. An older person gets priority. Why? Because, hey, he or she might not be around. It used to be 65. I think now it's either 70. It might even have gone up to every so often they change it, saying, yeah, you're not old enough. You got to be 70-something. I think it's 70 right now. So that gets priority. Cases that are viewed as old, like if it's in the system more than several years, it gets priority because we have a rule in the state system. A case must go to trial within 5 years of filing. So if there's a case that's now 4 years and 9 months old, man, some judge is going to push it to the top and say, we can't violate this rule. There is a rule in certain courts that judges don't get paid if they don't process cases within a certain time frame. So that, of course, has a big impact, right? That's not in California. But there are some courts literally where checks can be held up if certain rulings aren't made within a certain period of time. So there's all sorts of behavioral theories of what gets judges, because judges are decision makers. And sometimes, I work for a judge, so I know sometimes a hard case. And you know what? They're on the fence. Sometimes they really don't know which way to go. Should we go one way? Should we go another way? I want to make a point about that. There was a case that was decided 2 months ago. It bore right on this topic of, should we allow, as the U.S. Supreme Court, the right to have contracts that waive class actions through requiring arbitration? And a lot of people were like, maybe the Supreme Court's going to say that's unfair because it may leave these parties without any remedies. And the effect was with the Gorsuch nomination and ultimately him taking the bench, Gorsuch voted with a 5-4 split that said, you can have those contractual clauses that force arbitration and waive class action rights. So that's a big policy decision. That's like saying, look, we're going to let businesses state in their terms and conditions how they do business, and they're going to maybe eliminate the risk of this big class action case.
It's a good point. We have just a couple of minutes left, but one of the other things I want to have you address quickly is we've been talking about how this affects the business that starts it, right?
Right.
What about the consumer side? And I guess my question for you on that, on the consumer side is, should this be a red flag, or I should say a statement to the consumer, be careful who you give your private information to online? Because what if you have this startup company that doesn't have any backing, or they're just throwing stuff on the web, and they're asking for your social security number.
That's right. I mean, look, I know people that will not give credit cards online. They will buy and preload a debit card, and they will use a debit card because they'll say, I'm not going to have my credit card number stolen. Look, my dad was old school. He never had a credit card at all. He would go rent a car, and they'd say, where's your credit card? And he'd say, I don't have a credit card. They'd say, do you have like 3,000? Do you have like 3,000 in cash? I remember as a kid saying, Dad, you don't have a credit card. Get with it. What's wrong? He says, well, I just don't believe in that. I mean, he was totally old school. Of course, my mom bailed him out because she had a credit card. She was a lot more forward thinking, as we know. I mean, she would have been a billionaire by now, just to connect up to one of our first topics. But in general, yes, you have to take some precautions, be smart. There's people that are completely getting out of anything electronic. I don't know if I buy that view. That sounds almost like an impossibility, but literally their view of life is the less electronic aspects to my life, the safer I am. And I think there's an author that wrote a book about it saying it's doable.
This whole stuff with Facebook, it's funny, we talked about this too, that as we closed, that, when this whole internet thing started with the Googles and the Microsoft, I shouldn't say the Microsoft, but the Facebooks, and, there was all this glamour and glitz around them, right? Now the kind of reality setting in, huh? Well, what are these guys doing?
No one would have ever believed. If you asked someone when Facebook was at 100,000 users, if you said to them, Facebook is going to get to 1 million users, they would have said, no way, it'll peter out at 200,000-300,000. And when they were at 1 million, you said, they're going to get to 1 billion. You said, that's crazy. Are you nuts? Are you crazy? They're never going to get there. They are now at 2.2 billion. The same exact thinking is happening. No one believed Apple would get to $1 trillion valuation. Think about that. That's a huge valuation.
It's amazing.
Now people are saying the next road is $2 trillion. And, of course, people are saying, no way, there's no company in the world that's worth, there aren't, like, Argentina is not worth $2 trillion. The entire country is not worth that. And people are saying, no, that's where they're headed. And that may be true. Maybe that's true.
All right, we're going to have to cut it off. Jack, thanks again. Great topic, great show. We'll hopefully have you back next week. We'll continue our series. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thanks again for checking in. For more information, you can always go to RERadiolive.com. Take care.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.